This is iHeart, the world's biggest and I'd say best health and wellness shop, and it's right on your phone. You know, five-star ratings. Our app has more than 1.3 million of them. It's a lot of stars. You can shop more than 30,000 health and wellness.
I wish I could make this larger. I gotta get that's Hannah. No idea. Yeah, I'll get up now. I will fix that and I just said. Oh, I don't hear anything there yet.
Just pictures, so just looking at the picture. Beth just came
Did you do something to get these things on here?
in. No,
But I hit those people.
oh, you did. I don't know, dear.
Hi, Lou. How are you doing this morning? This afternoon, whatever it is. Oh, yeah. I just looked at the picture, I blew it up as much as I could, but you're right, it's dark. I don't have any idea what it is. But yeah, for like a little tiny fly or something, no. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, well, all spiders are poisonous. Just depends the extent to which they're poisonous. Most of them won't harm us very much. But mhm. No, I don't blame you for that. Maybe we won't get a pick, get a pick run unless it comes out.
Someone needs to mute themselves.
Society of Bangor, both grief, storytelling, and also celebration. In this space, both tears and laughter are welcome. There will be a time later in the service where anyone will be invited to share a brief memory aloud. After we hear from a few designated people, I can bring a microphone around so that everyone can hear you, including the folks online. Your voice may be loud enough for this space, but it won't carry over the internet. So microphone will be helpful. Speaking of designated folks, however, Ida Morrison, Judy's classmate from the class of '53, unfortunately could not be here this afternoon. So when we get to that point where she would have spoken, I will ask if there is anyone else here from the class of '53 who might offer a memory or two of Judy. You don't have to designate yourself beforehand. We'll just all appreciate hearing from you when we get to that point. For anyone less inclined to public speaking and more inclined to write something, there is paper available in the hall called the Dorothy Memorial, where all are invited to join in a reception after the service. Thank you to the Guild for putting on the reception. Judy was a longtime active and beloved member of the Guild, and I know this reception is a work of love for her and for this community. Our experiences of grief and loss unite us with people of all times and places who have faced death with many different customs, beliefs, and wisdom. We know that death is a part of our lives, that life and death are inseparable. And we know that when we open our hearts to love others, eventually our love will include loss and grief. Judy knew this all too well in her own lifetime. But knowing this does not make loss any easier. It is good to be present to one another in such times. We may have different understandings of what happens after death, but we can believe strongly in life before death. And Judy Boothby lived her life to the full. We honor that fullness of life today in words, music, and memories. Many of you remember Judy's love for dance. It seems fitting that as we say farewell, we are in the midst of dance recital season for the local dance schools. The introit that we'll hear in a moment is a piano piece often used for practicing dance, and it is intended here to evoke the spirit of dance that moved throughout Judy's life. But first, John and Anik, Judy's nephew and niece, will light the chalice.
Course lie all the verities and realities of your existence, the bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today, well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day.
I'm Taylor Boothby, Judy's grandson. The naturalist John Burroughs wrote, "The laws of life and death are as they should be. The laws of matter and force are as they should be. I have had life, and somewhere, somehow, the course of nature is justified. I shall not be imprisoned in a grave. I shall be diffused in great nature, in the soil, in the air, in the sunshine, in the hearts of those who love me, in all the living and flowing currents of the world. My elements and my forces go back into the original sources out of which they came, and these sources are perennial in this vast, wonderful, divine cosmos.
I invite you to stand as you are able. You'll find hymn number 1064 in the blue hymnal, and I understand that words will also be on the screen. We sing together.
The Dancer by Eleanor Morrow, dedicated to one mother-in-law from another, in fellowship from one dancer to another. You've learned to point the toe, to limber the muscles of the leg, but it's when the vibrations within guide you to movement that you become alive. Your leaps link turns to the sweep of a Chopin etude. With arms that weave and flow, you dance through the doubt and confusion, through life's eternal questions, imprint an airy trail with decisions. With the grace of a swan and to the heartbeat of a rhythm only you can hear, you nurture a home, show 3 suns, the patterns of life's dance, pulsing forward, marking time, finding balance, only to know the art of letting go as dying 2 of them drift away. In slower motion, you must embrace your life partner one last time. Wend your path through changing spaces, the colors in your head, still finding harmony with each step, until stretching up to the day star, your body releases its energies into the universe.
Thank you all for being here. Judith White was born July 7th, 1935, one day after the Dalai Lama was born in Tibet. Auspicious couple of days. Her parents, John and Margaret Fellows White, valued education and the pursuit of interesting experiences to broaden the mind for Judy and her brother Ralph. Judy did well in school and made good use of the Bangor Public Library. It was quite a thrill when, at age 7, she could get her own library card. They attended the Unitarian Church over on Union Street for several years. At age 12, she was an angel in the Christmas pageant, and drawing back the curtains to reveal Mary and Joseph gazing into the manger, which had straw and a light bulb in it. And they were supposed to keep those curtains open until after the recessional, but Judy could see that Joseph, in his heavy costume, was sweating profusely. And so she signaled the other angel that perhaps they ought to close the curtains early, which they did as if it had been planned, just in time to conceal from the congregation the sight of Joseph puking into the manger. Oh, I'm missing a page. Yep, I am. I'm missing a page. Just a second. No, it's printed front and back. They didn't tell me. There it is. Judy had a strong intellect and ambition. When she was about 11 years old, she told her grandfather, the Judge Raymond Fellows of beloved memory, that she might be a lawyer when she grew up. Well, this was about 1946, and her grandfather told her there were no women lawyers. But she knew that women could make their way in the world, as she observed her own mother was an avid silversmith, spending considerable hours at her workbench in the basement, creating jewelry that people actually bought. And Judy pursued her own passions. From age 7, she studied dancing under Polly Thomas, at first for the fun of it, but it soon became an obsession. At age 12, she got favorable notice in the Bangor newspaper for a solo performance at a recital. And it was about then that she learned she really did like applause. She served as a demonstrator for the younger children's classes and began developing her own technique. She said ballet class was 75 minutes of grueling exactitude for 10 minutes of moving with reckless abandon. She loved it. Working as a demonstrator earned her an extra lesson per week. So her father gave her an equivalent amount of money for the earned lesson because he said it was saving for him. Now I'm out of order. Saving that money for him. She said, I never understood the logic, but if anyone thinks that my work is worth money, I won't refuse it. Now, in the summer of '51, she went to the Bar Harbor Summer Dance School in Hulls Cove. And after a couple of days, she told the director that the toilets were filthy. At age 16, one will say most anything. But if the director would provide rags and cleanser, she would be willing to do some scrubbing. Well, 2 days later, the director gave her a scholarship, adding 3 weeks of glorious pain and performance to the 2 weeks her parents had paid for. The director said she liked Judy's dancing, but whereas Judy was the only non-advanced scholarship student, she suspected that the director also liked her scrubbing. Then a different sort of adventure came in the summer of '52, when she went abroad with the American Field Service, staying a month in the Netherlands with an Irish farming family, and a month near Liège, Belgium, where she got to make good use of her high school French. In the fall of '53, she enrolled at the University of Maine at Orono, majoring in French and German. She enjoyed the literature and social life on the weekends and continued to dance. The AFS called on her again in the summer of '56 to chaperone a busload of 20 European students on a tour of the US. She kept track of the money and whereabouts of the students for 3 weeks, keeping a watchful eye on illness and tardiness and their manners and torrid romances. At the end, her boss said she had done a good job. And others thought so too, because the AFS hired her to work at their office in New York City after she graduated in 1957. They even sent her to Europe to escort incoming students on the boat back to New York. En route, she was to interview all the students, sequester their cash, make note of any foreseeable needs and problems. She was good at organizing. But by summer's end, she resigned that position. She liked the work, and her boss liked her work, but it was a long way from Charlie. Aww. She was homesick, so she returned to Bangor and enrolled in the teacher certification program at UMO. Charlie still had another semester to go to get his degree. She said she wouldn't marry a man without a degree. But Mom and Dad had, as you may know, a mixed marriage. Mom was Unitarian, but Dad was Universalist. But then again, her parents were also of a mixed marriage, as her mother was raised in the Unitarian church on Union Street, and her father grew up in this church when it was Universalist. Mom and Dad were married in this sanctuary in February of '58 and settled near Portland, where she did 8 weeks of practice teaching to finish her training. But that spring, Charlie was drafted and was off to boot camp. Judy had her certificate and got her first teaching position at Leavitt Institute in Turner, where she taught 3 sections of French and a civics class. She said it was a bit like being ringmaster at a semi-motivated circus. She coached a drama production, choreographed a chorus line of dancers for minstrel show, and helped a group of juniors start a school newspaper. And during that year, she lived with her new in-laws in South Livermore, which was a well-intentioned but emotionally difficult arrangement. When Charlie was posted to a base in Georgia, they moved to the Atlanta area, and Judy taught in a high school that suffered from the overcrowding that many schools experienced at that time. She said there was much to enjoy in Atlanta, but they were not sorry to leave when Charlie's service was up. She said, "There was too belligerent a fervor for sweet Jesus in the prayers for the football team to my liking." Returning to the Portland area, she got a job teaching at the Waynfleet School, where during the ski season, many students used Mondays as sleep-in class day. That job ended in spring of '61 with the birth of their first child, Tim. Soon, Charlie got a new job in Belfast, and Judy was happy to move there to be much closer to her parents in Bangor. Judy volunteered around Belfast, learning that even while diligent efforts can come to very little, it can be worth it. While in Belfast, Andy and I were born, and Judy was absorbed in the role of mommy at home, with decidedly mixed feelings about her role and status. She accepted an invitation to coordinate the local multiple sclerosis campaign, and as a way of, as she said, getting her brain out of the diaper pail. Even Tim made calls on his toy phone for mycocirrhosis. And the campaign brought in $800, which was considered quite a success. Then in 1965, Charlie got a job in Augusta, and we moved to Winthrop. And even as we were unpacking, Charlie had to report for 2 weeks active duty with the reserves, and Judy discovered little Andy happily munching away on aspirin in the bathroom. She called the neighbors and rescued the situation. By Christmas time, with the stress of 3 babies, the disruption of multiple moves, and other burdens, Judy hit a low point. She was depressed. She realized something was wrong the day she had a strong desire to light the Christmas tree on fire, and yet she suffered in silence for many months, feeling that her emotional needs felt selfish. When she finally confided in her mother the depths of her trouble, Grandma White must have made some calls because a local doctor made contact right away and convinced Judy to admit herself to the hospital. Judy was relieved to get the help. She was able to come to terms with her repressed anger, for, of course, one wasn't allowed to be angry, of course. But anger around certain people who habitually criticized her unfairly and undermined her confidence. But she came to accept that her own opinions and efforts and plans were legitimate. And after a few weeks, the staff said she was a model patient. She returned home and felt much better. In addition to a monthly therapy group, she eagerly volunteered for a new AFS program in Winthrop. She was able to use her expertise to make that experience for those students go well. She volunteered with Parents' Creative Arts Committee, helping to bring artists to 33 school districts in the Augusta area. However, the director of the program turned out to be a jackass, apparently threatened by her intellect, energy, and creative ideas. Fortunately, the executive director of the Maine State Commission on the Arts and Humanities offered to employ her as coordinator for the dance touring program of the National Endowment of the Arts. It was an intoxicating opportunity, she said, better than carte blanche at Yves Saint Laurent, the airlines, theaters, and bookstores combined. And it was wonderful work. But when the grant ran out after a year, that was it. She decided to write about that year's experience in an article that she submitted to Dance Magazine. The editors paid her $50 for the article, which was a thrill. To get paid for her work was quite gratifying. Of course, what she worked hardest at was being the mother of 3 boys. She taught us to cook, to sew, to do laundry, taught us about manners and integrity, and Mom supported our efforts in music, scouting, sports, and being good citizens. She also had unique methods of discipline. If we were horsing around too vigorously, the sound of a pastry spatula rattling across the radiator sent all of us rats scrambling for cover. Of course, she was still dancing when she could, and encouraged us to learn dance as well. She took us to workshops for modern dance and jazz and tap. We learned how to wear tights, such that we didn't have what she called gorilla crotch. We attended church regularly at All Souls Unitarian in Augusta. And many Sunday mornings when we would come downstairs in our torn jeans and rugby shirts, Mom would instruct us to go up and put on some respectable clothes, to which we would reply, "I respect these clothes." Where'd we get that from? In 1972, she and another church member, Wendy Frucci, began composing and presenting liturgical dances for the church. It was the 70s, after all. The minister was enthusiastic and even had the front row of pews removed to make more room for the dancing. We were so proud of her work. Then in January 77, Charlie accepted a job in Washington, D.C., and Judy wrote tearful letters of resignation to the Maine State Ballet, local arts council, the schools, and the church. With these groups, she had felt herself as experienced and useful, and now it felt like starting over. We moved to Chantilly, Virginia, and we 3 boys were soon involved in the drama program. And Mom was a big supporter and even taught some classes in dance and movement, including how to fall properly on stage. She had considered earning an advanced degree, but with college on the horizon for 3 boys, she decided to pursue her realtor's license instead. She discovered to her fascination that the world of business is just as full of eccentrics as the world of the arts. And it was a real high point for her the year she sold $1 million worth of property. Now, in those days, you got to remember, it took a lot of houses to add up to $1 million. In late 1978, Tim developed a strange lump on his chest and was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease. For 5 years, Mom made many trips with Tim to doctors, chemotherapy, radiation, and other painful treatments that were painful for all of us. And yet we shared in the great joy when Tim married Kitty Adkins on January 1st, 1983. And they even got to move to Bangor for a time. But Tim's cancer returned and we lost him in May of '84. And the grief has never left us, especially in the springtime of each year. But the caring committee of the Fairfax Unitarian Church was a real support for our family. And Mom decided that she wanted to help others who were going through similarly difficult times. A few years later, Andy moved to Richmond to pursue his acting career, and I went to seminary in California. And Mom and Dad would go see Andy's shows and supported ministerial interns at the Fairfax Church. And then in 2000, Judy and Charlie retired and moved to Bangor, to the house on Kenduskeg Avenue. Mom was happy to be in her childhood home, close to her brother Ralph and his wife Joni, near her mother for her final years, and in the city where she had so many old friends. Dad was thrilled to have an acre of good soil to work with. But they were soon involved with this church and projects around the city. Mom served on the board of the Bangor Ballet, joined the Keepus group and served as president. She served on the Bangor Commission on Cultural Development, working with the Schoodic Sculpture Symposium. She enjoyed monthly lunches with her classmates from Bangor High School class of '53 and was a faithful member of the Guild of this church. She wrote letters and cards to friends and family, a habit slipping in our culture today. and she and Dad made many trips to the airport to greet the incoming troops. And when Mom heard that some small, remote post offices might be forced to close because of a lack of business, she started buying her stamps from the post office on Matinicus Island. She clipped recipes from newspapers and magazines and kept them among her large collection of cookbooks, some of which were her mother's. She was generous and kind. When I was a teenager, I remember my father saying on several occasions what a remarkable person Mom was, and how highly he regarded her intellect and her character. These words were well spoken, if only to add that she had a remarkable heart as well. Thank you for sharing this time together with us. I think that's it. Yeah, that's enough.
As we continue to share memories, I would invite Joni to come, and you can use either of those mics or come all the way up here if you'd like.
Is this better? Oh, yay. Judy's laughing. She's giggling. I was 19 when my older sister married and left Maine for good. Her new University of Minnesota professor's husband's work took them to many countries throughout the world, and Minneapolis, 12,000 miles away, became their permanent home. We have always been close, but I don't see her often enough. However, my older sister's life changed dramatically in 2000 when Judy and Charlie retired to Bangor. Suddenly, I had an older sister just 2 miles away. Judy and Charlie visit us often at the farm on Verona Island, now in that family for 95 years. As many of you know, I'm a sports fan, and in fact, I made a career of it. But I'm also a history fan, and I discovered through Judy that there are many other types of fans. For example, she was a gardening fan. Of course, that started with Master Gardener Charlie, but it flowed over onto me. Judy and Charlie visited us often at the farm, and when they arrived, Charlie would jump out of the car, grab a tool, and join Ralph in whatever project he was working on. Judy, meanwhile, looked for the most comfortable lawn chair, grabbed it, pulled it over to wherever I was working on my version of gardening, trying to make some flowers grow. As I weeded and pulled, Judy sat with me and told me the history of the farm and the Fellows White family. I loved every minute of it and got a big kick out of some of the stories she told, especially when I related to Ralph and got a different version. I miss her. I loved her dearly, and I am so fortunate to know that that feeling was mutual.
At this time, when Ida was going to speak on behalf of the class of 53 classmates, is there anyone else who is from that class that could offer a memory of Judy? Oh, I can bring that over. This one works best when it's right up against your mouth, unfortunately.
Right up next to my mouth. Oh, dear. Well, as you can see, I did not come prepared, but I do have memories. They go back to 7th grade at Fifth Street Junior High School, where Judy White, oh, I'm sorry, I'm Helen Willie. I'm Helen West Willie. Where I just left off is that White and West had lockers side by side in the 7th grade at Fifth Street Junior High School. And we talked about everything, life in general, mostly boys. And we did have a continuing paths have crossed every time that we were in this same classroom. White and West were either in front of me or behind me. And at Miss Jessie Frazier's English class, our junior year, she came into the room with a big dramatic entrance saying, "I have an announcement to make." She said, "Judy White has been accepted into the American Field Service to study abroad." Wow. We didn't know what it was. I didn't anyway. And after I talked with her, she said, well, my parents were always in the know. They always knew what was going on in the community and the opportunities that might be there for me, and they suggested it, and I said, sure. And she spoke at all the service clubs and told about her adventures. What she told us was that they had wine at every meal. And that was a big deal, I'll tell you. And also, our paths crossed at the synchronized swimming group we belonged to, the Dolphins at the time. It continued on for years. But that's like ballet in the water. It's wonderful to have a sport. I wasn't very athletic in school, and Judy was known as a dancer. She was the ultimate dancer, except there was one other in our class, that was Sandra Eslin, who went from the Polly Thomas School of Dance to the Rockettes. And man, I always wanted to go there for the Christmas performance, and I will someday, right, Jamie? Okay. You know, but I think of Sandra and where they started, and Polly Thomas started here in this Dorothy Dix Fellowship Hall with dance lessons. And when I was in the 7th grade at like 12 years old or whatever, I came and took dance lessons. But I didn't go on to fame and fortune, but I did know some very extraordinary people from the class of 53, which is going to be celebrating, they are celebrating 70 years. Those that are left are very, 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 I don't know, Judy was a special person, and I can see from the eulogy all the things that she's talked about. Her husband and my husband were stationed at Fort Dix at the same time. You just never know down the road when your paths will cross, but ours crossed from early age until right up until the end when we were in Keep Us Together and other organizations. So I'll leave it at that and say I'm so, so pleased to have known her and had her in my life.
Thank you so much. And I would be happy to open up this time for other sharing of brief memories. I'm told that Judy had an appreciation of brevity, and we'll send that encouragement around with the microphone. So over to Sue here first.
I'm going to give you a very recent memory, because on St. Patrick's Day, I stopped in to see Judy, and Taylor was up to his elbows in brine, and Judy was peeling something, and they were going to have a wonderful, wonderful St. Patrick's Day meal. I'm sure it was.
Well, Judy and I had a big connection with dance. And I would say, I can't remember how many years, but it was at least 4 years that every Tuesday morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, we would have Sunrise with Soul. And we would dance our little hearts out for over an hour every single Tuesday. And she was dedicated. And every time we looked at each other, that's what we thought about first, I think, so.
Well, my name is Jane Bragg, and I took over Thomas School of Dance in 1983. I was the second owner, and I ran it for 31 years, and then was a co-founder of Bangor Ballet. At one point, for Bangor Ballet, I did a presentation for Keep Us, and Judy was the president, and she was so gracious and seemed so supportive. I thought, wow, she would make a good board member. And I had no idea she was a Polly Thomas dancer till after she came on the board. And so we had lots of reminiscences because I did not grow up in Bangor. I was not a Polly Thomas dancer. I did not become as accomplished a dancer as she did, but it was such a pleasure to work with her. And she was such an asset to that board. And we both certainly shared that great love of dance, especially classical.
Other memories to share.
My husband was on a search committee for the minister before 2 ministers ago, I think, I can't remember, with Judy. And one of the meals that they had at the Boothbys was Judy's salmon lasagna, which he raved about. So I asked her to share the recipe. When I was on the search committee and people came to our house, I made that recipe. And I hadn't really looked at it for a few years and I realized that it wasn't just with the meals that Judy had wine, it was as she was preparing the meals, because it was right in the recipe. You add a little wine to the sauce, and then you pour yourself a glass. And then, so by the time you were finished with this very complicated recipe and your kitchen is a mess, you really didn't care.
I'm Felicia was Rudnicki, and it's Wiswell now. I went to school with Judy. And after we all graduated, I never went to a class reunion. But one day, I got a phone call from her. And she said, some of us girls from our class are going to get together for lunch out on Verona Island. Yeah. Would you be able to join us? I was flabbergasted. I did not expect to hear from any of the class members at this point, but I went. And after that, we decided to have our last Thursday of the month class luncheons. We went around to different places. But from that, I was so glad to get to know Judy better than I did in school, because I was very, very shy when I was in school. And from that also, we put together a scholarship for the class of 53. And I know Judy is very pleased with what has happened with that scholarship, because I got a letter from one of the recipients just this week. And I think Judy would be so pleased to hear what this young lady said. It sounded a lot like what Judy was like. Thank you.
My name's Rebecca Berry, and my husband is Frank Berry, who is a cousin of Judy. And I wanted to just share that my husband and I, Frank, got married at the farm on Verona, thanks to Ralph and Joni and Judy and Charlie. And we were the only other couple, I believe, Joni, that were married there besides Judy and Ralph's parents, Margaret and John White. So that was very special. And then fast forward 2 years later, 4 years later, we had our daughter Gwenny on November 22nd of 2005, which happened to also be Judy's mother's birth date, November 22nd. And I remember I was in a dark room. They had moved me from where I was with Gwenny, and I was by myself, and the room was dark, and it was cold. It was November, and this beautiful woman walked into the room with this beret and this dark jacket and the gloves and the whole thing, and it was Judy, and she just came and sat with me and shared all of her stories about her mom. And I will always, always, always treasure those connections that our family has, my daughter Guinevere has with her.
Hi, I'm Cindy. I'm Judy's niece. And something that always stands out to me about my Aunt Judy was her positive attitude. As any of you have ever spoken to her on the phone, whenever you called, it was always, hello. She was so happy to hear from you. She carried that to the end. I mean, even when she was not well, before that, when Uncle Charlie was ill, she just always had this tremendous positive look on life, and it's something that I aspire to. It means a lot to me.
Just because Rebecca, was brave and spoke. We started to call it her Judy duty because she showed up at every bedside, and for the good things and the bad things, and it was just a wonderful thing that she would do for everyone in the family. I mean, it didn't matter if you hadn't spoken to her in months and months and months, even years, she would show up. And it just made you feel really important. For every baby and every parent that died, she reached out. And Paul had mentioned the handwritten notes, and I made a point of always trying to make a handwritten note for her because of how much it meant to me to get handwritten notes from her. So she was Frank and my mother's first cousin, and cousins mean the world to all of our family, so it's pretty neat. So thanks for everybody for sharing your stories, because as kids you don't have this full picture of people as adults, because you're little and you're just like, this is who you play with on the 4th of July, and this is so this is wonderful to see a more complete picture, so thank you. Did I see a hand over there? Okay. I invite anyone who has a memory burning but doesn't want to speak it out loud, or if you come up with something that you'd like to share later, there's paper in the Dorothy where the reception is, and invite you to write it down as we continue to gather the stories and the memories.
Thank you all. Paul and Krista, Taylor, Ralph and Joni, all of Judy's family and friends and communities, thank you. Thank you for all that you have shared and for all that you will continue to share. Each of us lives within a whole web of connections, the contexts in which our life stories unfold. I think Judy may have had more connections than most people. As one fellow church member described her, she was always in the thick of things. She was devoted to family and church and classmates and so many different organizations in her life, here in Bangor and elsewhere, even internationally. I can speak a little bit for this community where she was loved and appreciated and made a tremendous difference. I couldn't begin to name all the things she has been a part of here and contributed to. I'm thankful that you have started naming some of them, and I know there are many more. She was known for her sense of humor as well as her dedication to doing things with class, not skimping, as in things like the tea service should be used rather than stored or displayed as if in a museum. This congregation and its predecessors, as you have heard, formed kind of bookends for Judy's life. As a child, she grew up in the Unitarian Church on Union Street, which merged with the Universalist Church in this location in 1995. But as you also heard, she made her own merger many years before that, when she and Charlie married in this sanctuary. And I say all of this, I repeat this, because when I first started here as the sabbatical minister, I didn't know any of this history of these two congregations. And now I see how fitting it is that Judy was the one to fill me in on all of this. That was much of what we talked about when I got that one chance to visit with her. Several days before she died, some church members had just been to visit her at home at Easter time, when she had worshiped online and appreciated hearing the organ that she and Charlie had been instrumental in having restored. Judy's life ended just as the blooming time of year was beginning, with that amazing star magnolia at the home on Kunduskeg. Here at UUSB, the Guild has planted a star magnolia tree in her and Charlie's memory. But Judy and Charlie, too, were not alone in their contributions to community in so many forms. Our lives unfold in a wider historical context also. And Judy was part of a generation of institution builders. She knew how to connect, how to put on a reception and write cards and letters, how to show up, how to create something together, even when people had different or difficult personalities, how to leave some legacies that would outlast her own life. And some scholars of culture have pointed out that in this historical moment now, we are losing the people who had those skills, who did these things quite naturally their whole lives, wherever they went. I'm not sure it's quite as dire as all that, but even if it is, I wonder if those of us who come after people like Judy can still learn by her example and inspiration. The mystery is that Judy, even though her bright light was unique, like each of us, was at the same time part of something so much bigger than herself. So while we are telling stories that remember and celebrate Judy's particular life, we may find that we are celebrating some bigger ideals also. For example, Judy had a strong confidence in what people can build together. By celebrating one person who worked tirelessly to support community in so many forms, maybe at the same time we are celebrating community with a capital C, the whole web of connections in which our own stories unfold. And by celebrating one person who loved dance so passionately, maybe we are also celebrating the spirit of dance with a capital D, a beautiful movement between and among and through us, which we can perceive when someone like Judy shows us. I mentioned before that it is dance recital season, and that included my own family this year. I have a daughter who is 7, the age that Judy was when she fell in love with dance. And this was my daughter's first dance recital. And as I watched her and her classmates fall in love with dancing on stage, I could not help thinking of Judy and feeling like that spirit of dance continues to move through the generations. And maybe by celebrating Judy's one particular life, so well lived, so beloved, maybe we are also celebrating life and love with a capital L and the sacred mystery that joins us all. Amen and blessed be.
And so, my beloveds, let us believe that pure thoughts, brave words, and generous deeds can never die. Let us believe that a noble, self-denying life like the one we honor today increases the moral wealth of humankind and gives us the assurance that the future will be grander than the past. We pause to honor a memory made beautiful to us by the life of one we have known and loved. We are grateful for all the evidences of that beauty that have gone out from this life into the lives of others and made the world a richer place for its presence among us. May we learn to be glad for that which has been, not as something now taken away, but as something given to us, even for a time, through which we have been richly blessed. May we rejoice again, share all beauty we have known, all faith and all hope, all love, and be grateful even for the end which comes in peace and blessed sleep. Amen.
And extinguishing our chalice this morning, this afternoon, today. And now let memory inspire us, and let the joy of renewed fellowship carry us forward through the days to come. Amen, and blessed be.